And with that being said, I would like to refer to the candidate before the council this morning, Margaret Albertson. Just as a bit of background, I have known Margaret for over 30 years. I call her Peggy, but I know she's before you as Margaret. We first met in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office in the early 90s, where she was one of the many assistant DAs that I supervised as the chief of the district courts. Having shown her talent and experience early on, she quickly became my chief deputy, and as a result, carried out the policy of the office through me to all of the assistant district attorneys in the districts and municipal courts in Boston. The one thing that I have to say is that her ability to supervise these attorneys was excellent. She stood in my stead in many instances before the various judges and the various courts, speaking on my behalf. And she was well received not only by the judges then, but was also well received by all the assistant ADAs whom she supervised with me while we were in Suffolk. Fast forward to several years later, Peggy and I had the opportunity to work again, where she was the clerk magistrate at the South Boston Division of the Boston Municipal Court. I was the first justice there, and our relationship continued, our professional relationship continued probably 9 years after that. Needless to say, when I arrived in South Boston, the clerk's office, which as many of you know, is the real face of the trial courts in the community, was being run very efficiently, but most importantly, it was being run in a way where the people in the community felt comfortable coming in and seeking assistance and seeking help in our municipal court. Peggy was a fabulous manager. She managed the staff very effectively, which also allowed the staff to work efficiently throughout the day. But most importantly, Peggy always demanded respect to the community when they came to that front window. And she was the leader. She showed by example. She led by example. You know, it can be very difficult at that front desk in the clerk's office on any given day in a busy urban court. But I have never seen Peggy lose her control. I have never seen her lose her poise and confidence. She always treated everyone with respect, and I think as a result, the trial court was much better off with her as the face of the South Boston Division of the Boston Municipal Court. And finally, being the first justice in South Boston, which is a one-judge court, I sometimes did not have the colleagues around me to run things past when I was making some of my judicial decisions. Peggy was always up on the law. Peggy always was very in tune to the trends that were going on in the court, and she was often my backstop when I had to discuss issues of law that had recently occurred and that were recently developing in the courts. So her ability to be on top of the law as well as to run the office was an unbelievably helpful thing for me as the single justice in this South Boston division, excuse me. So as a result, let me just sum up by saying I can't think of a better candidate with the experience, the temperament, the skill set to become an associate justice of one of our Boston municipal courts. And I would highly recommend that she be considered to move on. And I would be remiss if I did not say that years from now, you all will be very satisfied with your decision to advance her to those positions. So with that being said, if there are any questions from the council, I would certainly be willing to answer questions. Again, I apologize for the digital and technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Judge,
I want to thank you for your service. I can't believe you're retiring. I've been trying for years to change that 70. I don't have the authority, and it's a shame to lose you. Thank you for your service. I always say I don't have a crystal ball, and you never let me down, and I've always been proud. That was one of my proudest votes, so I wish you all good luck and health in your retirement. Thank you. And your testimony was very meaningful, and everything you said is absolutely true. And what I like about you talking for her and the other witnesses, that you know her. You know her through the years, so you're talking from your experience with her. We've had people sitting in this chair testifying, and I've asked, how do you know this nominee? How many times have you seen him or her in court? Once. So your testimony and the testimony here from the witnesses mean a lot to me. So thank you so much. I'm sorry you're not here in person.
Thank you very much, Counselor.
So we'll let you go, Judge, but I just want to indicate to you that the counselors voted for you to be a judge and Peggy to be a clerk, so we could get you, us defense lawyers could get you two out of the DA's office, so we can bring a case now and then.
It's working there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you all. Have a good day.
Counselor Iannello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Counselor.
Your resume, 17 years ago, you became the clerk. You've done a great job.
Fancy phone, you
Your
can.
family, people I speak to, people here, I have to court, clerk's office, just say you do what, great job. Quick question. Continuances. I mean, you have most of the folks here who are lawyers on the council. They work for themselves, so sometimes they have to be in multiple. What is the Judge Albertson going to be? If somebody comes in and says, yeah, I need a continuance, I know. Could be the third, could be the fourth. It's a legitimate reason why. What are you going to do in those circumstances?
I'm going to listen to all the parties that are before me, the reasons why the continuance is requested, see if there's any opposition to it. But in my experience, continuances are very helpful in cases, both in the civil and the criminal. And often you get the parties in the court, and that reality of stepping into court tends to move the ground a little bit, shifts it, and then all of a sudden the parties say, no, let's step this back, we need another conversation. So I'm pro continuances if that's such a thing, so long as there's not an issue of harm or detriment to someone.
Give me an example of how that would happen. That would be definitely someone to have for a continuance.
Well, I mean, on the criminal case, if you've got a case that's been dragging on for 2.5, 3 years, and there's a victim in this family.
So other than something, any case that's been dragging on 3 or more years, do you think it's an because you have some attorneys, not me, I'm a small practitioner. You got a guy like Kennedy who's got like 30, 40 cases.
He's used to hearing from me on continuance.
Speed dial for him, right?
How many cases I had last week? I go, oh, man, it was a big number. Oh, I said, he's lying.
Where was it, my lying?
No, you've done a great job. I don't have any questions for you. What a great education. You got Holy Cross, you got BU Law. I mean, that's a dream for most people. That is a dream. Assistant DA, you've been a clerk. I mean, your family should be so proud of you. And what a family you come from. Your father, you got your brother over there. I mean, you have a family of public service. Your brother's doing an outstanding job in difficult times on the Boston City Council. And, I'm sure, all your family and friends must be so proud of you and your family. When your name comes before us not next week. Next week. So that's great.
We can have the assembly now.
Yeah, not the week after. I'll be more than happy to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I think that if you talk to my brothers, myself, and my husband and my children, the credit goes to my parents. They They supported us in everything and anything that we needed to do in that education, is they made sacrifices for us to get the education and have that opportunity. So I thank you, but my thanks really is to my parents.
And speaking of your parents, just for a second, my neighbor loves your family. Our former state senator Arthur Lewis.
Sure.
Oh, he's the best. I really like him a lot.
My dad have been best friends since they
Yeah.
worked here.
Yeah, I know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Counselor Duff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a lot to be said for institutional knowledge, and I'm serious, and even genetic institutional knowledge, as your family knows from public service, there's a lot to it. And clearly, as has been, displayed verbally already, with your education, you would have had many other paths where you would make a lot more money than you're making right now. First of all, I would like to compliment you and the clerks and district court throughout the state for what I think was tremendous yeoman's work during the pandemic. Faced with challenges that we've never been faced with. We actually had a meeting because there's constant, people don't understand, but there's constant churn in the courts, right? In all levels. So we are constantly meeting. We don't take the breaks like the House and the Senate, bless their hearts. But, we go straight through, and there are real, as you know, court-like consequences to us not meeting because everything stops. And it doesn't mean it just stops here. It means it stops for you and it stops for the man on the street. We actually had to hold a hearing before we had even figured out how to do the video with just audio. And, it's a challenge, but I have to say the staff in this building rose to it, as did the clerks. Can you share with me, if you're comfortable, some of what we would say? I always like to look, I'm an accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative type of person. Some of the things that you all learned about using technology, and were there challenges in your particular courthouse?
There were many challenges. The quickness of the shutting down of the state and the city and what we were going to do. We had cases that were already scheduled months out in advance. Again, my credit goes to staff. I couldn't have done it alone. I didn't have to do it alone. When we were told that the first justice, the clerk, magistrate, and the chief court officer needed to be in the building, I showed up. 4 individuals in this room were also there with me. We actually created a COVID war board, as we called it, to try to figure out what we needed to address so that nothing got left to the side and no defendant's case wasn't addressed, no victim's case, no restraining order. We collaborated and really worked as a team to make sure that people had access to justice. It was important, even though the sign on the door says we weren't open, we were open. We were answering the phones. So the challenges we had, we're in an old building, and we have difficulties with our phones. We have difficulties with the electricity at times, but same thing, we had the technology. So we started on the bridge line, which then grew to a polycom situation, kind of like what you have here. We didn't get Zoom up and running in the courthouse for about 6 months later. And again, credit to my staff, they were in it. Joanne here from the Boston Municipal Court also was on the phones with us all the times, just making sure that we had the technology that was available. And it wasn't always available, but it kind of rolled out. So I think that then not having the infrastructure to support the technology, once we got in there, there were some bumps with that. But for the most part, the administrative office, the trial court, really tried to give us what we needed to make sure that people had access to justice. And we did our best, and it was not easy, but again, I couldn't have done it without them. And now we've actually adopted some of the things that we've learned. So, the CMVI is a civil motor vehicle here. We were doing those over the phone, and now we're doing them on Zoom, which saves people from taking a whole day off, right, to fight a ticket. We've been doing small claims, which has allowed people who have since moved during COVID and maybe living in New York or Connecticut and California don't have to come back. We're using that technology for access to justice so that their cases are heard. We still have it in the courtroom. We're kind of using that so that the defendants don't have to be transported back and forth on matters that the counsel, that their attorneys can do in the courtroom on the Zoom. But We like being in person. I mean, that's what the court is about, helping people, and there's some things that you just need to see in person that you can't see on Zoom, or you can't see in the technology. So we have learned, we have grown, we have adopted some of the technology for the access to justice, but give me the in-person any day.
I agree. I think all of us like to be, it's not just being in person and seeing people. There's something about being, even if you're opposing somebody, there's something about, it's like going to the cinema. There's something about being in community. It's just not the same. What would you say are some of the, because as you know, access to justice is one of my pet peeves, and I probably said to you, you know, some of my thoughts might be considered a bit radical, because I think the Band-Aid solutions to our courts are fiscally irresponsible and wasteful. You know, this whole conversation about 90 million into the Springfield courthouse is ridiculous, so if you blow it up and build a new one. I don't know why their delegation isn't saying that. And part of the reason why, it's not just the inability of the technology like in your building, it's not built for that. I'm a realtor, and I've worked as a general contractor literally boots on the ground in projects. There are some things that cannot be converted, not with what we need today. It's not possible, not to the price of doing it correctly. But the other issue in this is when we say access to justice, that very first word, accessibility. Is your courthouse friendly? And I don't know the answer, I'm not trying to trick you. You know, to somebody in a chair, a wheelchair, to somebody who can't see, to somebody who can't hear. Because probably 90% of us, I used to know the number, I don't know anymore, so I'm going to guess, 90% of us will be quote unquote disabled or differently abled at some point in our life. When we have to report, you know, I've worked with the administration and they have listened on something, but I have to say they've listened to this, and we're seeing more people being appointed to positions on the bench that have different abilities than we've seen before. Clerk, magistrates, you know, some people, we don't know that they can't hear. We don't know that they can't see, but they can't. How is your courthouse with that? I mean, can you use more help, or does it meet the standard?
We are an old courthouse. South Boston, Charlestown, and East Boston are three of the oldest buildings, I think, within the Boston Municipal Court Department, and none of them have been renovated in recent times. But we have made accommodations to make sure that access is available. So myself and my staff, if somebody is outside the building and can't get in for some reason, we go out. We bring the services out to them as best we can. We have, through the administrative office, we also have the instruments for the hearing impaired. If there's, you know, a need for that, we employ that. We walk people through the Zoom. If they can't get in, we pivot and we make the technology work for them. So again, we can bring them into the court without physically bringing them in. So we have had to do that because of the age and the limitations of the building. Yeah. And it's worked. But as you said, it's a Band-Aid approach right now, and I think that we have to be cognizant that you said there are more people out there that they use the courts for so many things.
Population, and at some point in the game, a lot of us are going to be in court for something. It might be just to support, you know, I was there with a client just in support because she was so nervous to go into the courtroom. You know, there are some of us who don't practice law. There are reasons why we would be in a courtroom. And it's, you know, I know Mayor Wu just made the Boston City Council chambers accessible. We thought they were accessible, but they really weren't. And it's just shifting, and it's not to point fingers or say fault. I'm not about that. I'm about, like, how do we make it better?
And I think, but with that though, we can't lose sight of the importance of the community court.
Correct.
You can make a court accessible to someone, but it may not be really accessible because it's not within the community. I think we need to really emphasize the importance of those community courts. Because we serve the community and we do our best in any way we can. I'm not sure that making a court center is the,
Not courts.
right, is the,
Courts, which are, you know, the thing.
not everybody can
We
get there.
did not speak, right? But it was in the last administration, it's in this administration, it will probably be in the next administration. And you and I had this conversation. My objection to that is we have a crappy public transportation system. And if someone can't get to court, there is no access to justice, and there's no justice for all, and we're just talking words. We're not speaking reality. I live on an island. Before I moved there, I thought it was a peninsula. I didn't actually realize Gloucester was an island. It's really an island. And there are really people who don't leave. I mean, they never have. I mean, it's a different mindset. Our court is gonna be closing pretty soon for renovations. The deep, real concern is, will it ever reopen? Or will they move us up the line, as they call it, to Salem, which is 26 miles away? And what does that mean? That means in a domestic dispute, the perpetrator and the victim may be on the same train if it runs on time. And then they still have to walk to the courthouse. They still have to pay almost $20 just for the trip. Doesn't talk about, what you're gonna do with your kids and everything. There are a lot of really complex issues here.
You don't have to live on an island to have that same experience, so.
To have an island so often.
Would experience that same thing if you ask them to go to, I don't know, Revere, to have a case or something like that. So you're right, it's the story, it's the personal experience.
Right.
But the important thing is, how do we make sure that people do have access?
I'm so pleased to hear you speak about that, because I think it's something that we have lost sight of. And I think, I've said it many times and I'll say it again, courts are in the business of administering justice. We're not in the business of making money. We don't want to waste money, but we are one of the 3 branches of government, and we get about 2.5% of the state budget. So they can cough up a little bit more dough, frankly, the reps and the senators. They have to. This is a huge issue. I'm Irish, and I'm Italian. I can run my mouth about this stuff forever, but my family is also originally from Charlestown and West Roxbury, so I know almost tribalism of particularly our Irish clans in those communities. Thank you for your application. I think that you bring a lot to the Commonwealth, and thank you for dedicating your life to public service. And I'm sure there are some nice things about it, I hope, but I also know that somebody with, not just the great family and support that you came from, but with beautiful education, you'd be making 3-4 times the money in the private sector. And I think it's very important that people understand that you do this out of service. And I for one, appreciate it. So thank you for your application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
Good morning. I think we're going backwards on the technology. A lot of places won't let you zoom in anymore at pre-trials and C&Es. Well, the judges take the attitude that we shouldn't be doing that anymore, that the pandemic's basically over and people should have to appear, including defendants on compliance and election dates, pre-trial hearing dates. How do you feel about that?
I follow the standing order.
Well, now you're a judge. It's not the standing order anymore. Court. Judge Joe Ferrara's in front of you with the client, says, Judge, he's in school. Can we waive his appearance today?
Well, I think we've worked well over the years as clerks, trying to, with the attorneys, being understanding when in that situation. So I would see no reason why your client, if you're there as the attorney, you've had contact with him, you know where he is or she is, and asking for to waive the appearance.
That's my point. Some judges are saying, want them here. Every time. You think that's necessary? But didn't we learn something from the pandemic? That on compliance and election dates and pretrial dates and non-event dates, shall we say, that we don't really need the client there?
I agree.
I find that things move a lot smoother and more quickly. Cases move more quickly when 100%. Something's happening, it's different, okay? I have to move a case at a court this afternoon and I have it tomorrow. I can't make it. They're no longer accepting motions to continue by email, which I could put on a Zoom at 2 o'clock if they did that. They're saying you have to bring the motion out. You can Zoom in, but you got to bring the motion out. If I have to be there, I have to be there. That's necessary.
I respect how each of the first justices and the clerk magistrates interpret the standing order for their needs of their court, but in my court, if you know, we have.
Put the standing order aside, just put it aside, let's just talk common sense.
Can't, because the standing order is what controls this. I mean, that controls the operations.
The trial court, common sense doesn't come from the trial. I've established that.
Have some discretion, but we also need to have rules, right? Because we can't have 250 courts all.
But why can't the rule be, if you're gonna file a motion to continue, you can email it in? It worked for 2 years during the pandemic.
It did, but I'm not sure the email system was set up for that purpose. I mean, that's not
But
the.
it worked.
It worked for some. It's hard. I mean, I'm,
Maybe we gotta fix things a little bit.
you know what, to be honest with you, we need more staffing, because we cannot man,
I agree with that.
my staff cannot man everything and the general email box to make sure that that stuff is prepared.
I agree with that. You need more staffing, 100%. But just in terms of, the federal court system, everything's e-filing. Everything.
But we're not an e-file system, that's the other thing. I mean, this was a Band-Aid, as Council Duff talked about, it was a Band-Aid approach, it was a temporary approach that stays with us, and you're right. We need to revisit to see if we can make it work better, but right now, we're stuck with the Band-Aid and no staffing to really make it do what.
I get the staffing issue, but, maybe if you're talking about important motions, like a motion to suppress or something, you want the hard copy there, you want it filed, you want it done probably. I don't think that's necessarily easy. But when somebody's filing a motion to continue something, you're gonna make them deliver it to South Boston to have it heard in the afternoon?
We don't do that now, and I don't see that being in a position.
It's happening, places, things like that.
I respect what the other first justices have decided, but we've made it work for the betterment of the attorneys and us as well.
Some of the first justices are saying, I want the defendants, and some judges are here every single time, which I don't think is necessary either. And you touched on something else too, is the lack of consistency. We need consistency throughout the court. We have to know what the rules are. It's one rule in South Boston, it's another in Concord. You know what I mean? There should be some consistency. Anyway, that said, okay, I think you probably have the best staff in the court system. You know that I'm very, very familiar with all of them, and they are always incredibly helpful, not just to me, but to everybody who comes in there. So you absolutely, positively do. I've loved your family forever. Dad, as you know, was my friend back 45 years ago. He was very, very nice to me when I was a kid. So was up here. And I had a very warm relationship with him over the years. I hope he's watching this today. I know he's not doing as well as he was, but he was a great public servant, really dedicated, old style politician who really tried to help people. That's the way he was. And over the years, I know your brother Michael well. He does a great job on the city council. Has always been very helpful to me. People forget that I represent a portion of Boston as well. Your whole family's great public servants. You have a great background. You have always been incredibly accommodating to everybody in that court, including myself. Even before, I want to point out, I was on the governor's council. Okay, way back in 2005 when you started to come in there. So I thank you for that, and there's absolutely no question that I intend to vote for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor DePaolo.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you first for your career of service to the Commonwealth. And from what I've heard and talked to people, you've done it with integrity, which I value. I want to ask you about some of the decisions you'll be making as a judge. So in your application, you wrote about that your goal would be to gather all relevant information to assist you in balancing the goals of rehabilitation, deterrence, and public safety. Could you talk about how that balance plays out in your head?
Well, I think it first starts with gathering as much information as I can from the representatives of the parties. So in a criminal case, would be hearing from the Commonwealth, in addition to reading the police report, what they've heard from the victim, alleged victim in the case, or any witnesses. Also hearing from the defense attorney. As I spoke in my opening statements, hearing the defendant's story. We all have a story. What is it about this particular individual that had brought him or her before the court? Is there family support? Is there a substance use disorder issue? Is there a mental health issue? Are there services that we can direct to this individual so that we have a rehabilitation happening and not a repeat offender happening before the court?
So you'd imagine a defendant's background as if it's negative, to be a mitigating factor potentially against their behavior?
I think it's definitely something that should be made known. Hopefully the defense attorneys are going to tell you about their client.
Sure.
And I think.
Now, the reality in district court, especially with public defenders, is they don't have a lot of time necessarily with their clients ahead of appearing. Is that accurate?
From a small court perspective, I would tend to disagree with that. I mean, we see the same Suffolk Lawyers for Justice bar advocates coming through, as well as the CPCS attorney Donovan is here as well. She is a Suffolk Lawyers for Justice bar advocate who's in our court.
But my question is, if they're able to, how much time and in-depth knowledge of their defendant they're able to gather ahead of appearing in court with their defendant, with their client?
My experience is that they take their job of being a zealous advocate very seriously, and the information that I've witnessed, expressed to, or provided to the presiding justice has been pretty in-depth. And then again, I think the burden would shift that it wasn't, if I wasn't hearing enough information, then I would ask the questions and hopefully ask the attorney to provide additional information.
Because you're under a time crunch, it's worth the time to make those inquiries as a judge?
Absolutely.
Is it ever in the interest, so the three factors we're thinking about are public safety, deterrence, and rehabilitation. Is it ever in the interest of public safety to incarcerate a nonviolent individual?
Again, I would have to know all the facts in the scenario presented, but that question.
If there's no, if there's no history of violence, either in the criminal background or that's been brought up in court, and the charge itself is nonviolent, is there ever a public safety interest in incarcerating them?
It may be, but that would have to be something that would be brought out by the DA, I would imagine. But my thought is, I'm thinking of shoplifting, I'm thinking of trespass,
Sure.
I'm thinking of disorderly. Those are, in my opinion, not incarceration worthy dispositions. So if that's where, but if there's something that is not known,
Sure.
based on the charge, then that would be something to consider. But again, it's
Sounds like limited circumstances, but it's possible.
possible.
It's possible. And when it comes to deterrence, there's a lot of substance abuse disorder and addiction going through district court. Is it ever in the interest of deterrence to incarcerate someone with substance abuse disorder or addiction? Will that incarceration ever deter an individual from returning to court?
I don't think so. I mean, there should be, as we know, the road to recovery is not a straight road. So there has to be that understanding and compassion from the bench that a person is going to risk, they're going to have slips, they're going to have some slip-ups. But so long as that person doesn't become a danger to themselves or others as a result of that, then I think that the rehabilitation, the deterrence factor should be in the way of treatment, not incarceration.
And I was happy to hear you talked earlier in this hearing that you know some of the resources that are available in the community. That's a benefit of being in the position you're in now, to be elevated. What are examples of some of the resources that, as a judge, you could utilize, like specific community resources that could potentially be effective diversions for folks?
Sure. So from the South Boston court, my experience has been working with the Gavin Foundation. So over the years, the Gavin Foundation is within the community, has set up a treatment program. They have steps, they have housing. They actually have expanded out. They've got a women's home in Brockton. They've got another place in Quincy. Those are outside court resources that we can direct people to if they are interested in getting treatment. Boston Municipal Court Department also has a program called the BOAT program, which South Boston, Charlestown, West Brockton, Justice Kathy Coffey is the liaison or the coordinator of that. That provides outpatient addiction and mental health assistance to individuals who have pending criminal cases. So we have a boat session once a week in South Boston where a counselor comes from the program. The probation department is there, an attorney is there, and the judge is there, and they talk about the services that the defendants has been taking advantage of and how they're progressing through the treatment program. We also have the mental health courts. We also have the veterans courts. So there are a number of alternative.
So are you, in your experience, are you seeing reduced recidivism amongst the folks who are going through those programs? Or is it, well, how does it, what's the outcome?
You know, to be honest with you, I'm not as involved in the roster, if you will, of the individual there, but I could tell you past experience when we had a drug court,
Yeah.
we would see great successes from people that had worked that program, and they would come back as counselors. So they came back and they would be running the meetings in the evenings. We did lose a number of people to overdoses after they had been clean for a period of time and then took up again. But there was great successes, I think, in the individual courts with the drug courts.
Within the judiciary, are statistics kept on recidivism when folks are diverted into particular programs? Like, how do we know that? We know they're working anecdotally, and that's not a trick question.
No.
And if there isn't, as a judge, would you advocate to try to find a way to do that? Admittedly with limited resources, but it seems to me it's highly valuable because that's our goal, is to end recidivism.
As the clerk magistrate, I don't keep those statistics. Those
Right.
statistics aren't available to me or something that I would be able to gather. I would hope that the trial court is doing that. There are a number of programs, there are a number of departments within the trial court that's what they do. They gather statistics from mass courts and publish those as requested, but I would hope that they are looking at them because I think that's how we determine if we're doing the right thing. Maybe, do we have to tweak that program? Is there something else that needs to be done in order to provide the services?
Okay, let's shift gears for a second. So in the Harvard study, which is a couple of years old now, the disparities around racial sentencing start in the charging phase. And so a Black or Latino defendant is twice as likely to land in superior court when there's concurrent jurisdiction between district and superior. So in your role, or even just with your perspective on the system you've worked in, why do you think that's happening?
If my memory serves me right, in the study, they focused on the charging of those cases that had concurrent jurisdictions.
Right.
The gun cases, they were the serious narcotic cases.
Well, that's where, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's where that's where the sentencing disparity was. Okay, but back to the charging phase.
Well, the charging phase comes, I mean, that's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized what you're saying. Yes. Continue. I apologize.
So when they were looking at it, that's where the study was coming from. And I think that there's a lot of factors that go into that. There's the charging by the DA's office. There's the charging by the police, the original arresting.
So do you think that DA's offices are overcharging Black and Latino defendants?
I'm not in a position to say that with any.
Because if they're twice as likely to end up in superior court, it's happening somewhere, right?
But they're not telling you the communities that the individuals are coming from, right? I mean, you're talking about the Boston Municipal Court Department, which is a very diverse, there are 8 neighborhoods in the city of Boston with diverse populations.
Sure.
So nothing.
I think the study tried to control for everything they could in that regard. So we're likely, even if we could have more perfect information, we're still likely to see the difference, right?
Kudos to the individuals that did the research because there were a lot of things that they wanted access to and they just couldn't.
Able to.
Just couldn't get it. So they did an admirable job trying to get as much information and examine it and then come to the conclusions, I think, that have been very insightful as far as that document goes, I think, for those of us that work in the trial court.
Okay. Is it reasonable for folks to be concerned whether there's a balance between prosecutors and defense attorneys on the bench?
I don't think so. I think that I know both. And when, through all the vetting process that happens, including in this council, I think by the time the individual gets to the bench, they understand that they are to be fair and impartial. They're not a prosecutor anymore. They're not a defense attorney. They have to handle the case that's before them.
Great. Thank you again for your career service, and thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Earl.
I have a million questions for you, but We had a great conversation on the phone, and basically from reading your application and talking to you on the phone, also getting some calls from um, colleagues of mine in the judiciary, they have nothing but great things to say about you. I think you've got it all in terms of family and balancing those out. You've done your work in the trenches, so to speak, field to field. And I really don't have any questions. Your attitude about bail and domestic violence, those kinds of things will serve you well. I do want to point to one thing, though. It was my experience that if you've got someone, first offense, shoplifting, I agree, no big deal. But when you've got a record of shoplifting and breaking into cars, there's a drug issue there, really. And I think that's very different. There can be nonviolent crimes that do affect people and their sense of safety. Having had my car broken into, not happy. Having my house broken into, really not happy. And that stayed with me for a long time. So you can have a quote unquote nonviolent crime where nobody got hurt. But to me, any crime that affects someone's sense of security and safety is something that the public should be concerned about. I don't agree with incarcerating, anybody for first offense. And in district court, despite what all of the critics say, there's no first offense that I can think of that the district court has jurisdiction of where somebody's going to go to jail. It just doesn't happen. So, you're going to do a great job. I congratulate you. I usually tell people, make sure you've got a robe for you work the first day. Did I tell you that story? I was on the education committee for the district court, and this gal came in, and I was also mentor judges to judges in our area. And she came in and she said, okay, I'm ready. And I said, where's your robe? And she's like, I didn't know I have to get a robe. So I said, well, fortunately for you, my mom and dad gave me one and the Bar Association gave me one. So I will lend you this for as long as you need it, but today you're going to order a robe. So I usually tell judges for the first day, make sure you got a robe. And just walk around for a couple of years, getting up every day going, oh my God, I'm a judge. And you put the robe on and it's like, oh, wow, this is what I've been working for. So I think you're going to do a great job and I'm going to vote for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You think she could borrow your robe if she needs it?
Yes, I have a couple in the closet that I usually lend to people for moot court.
Councilor Ferrera.
Thank you. We had a great conversation. I appreciate your public service and your family's public service. I'm a big fan of your brother and respect what all of you have done over the years. You're going to make an excellent judge. You have my vote next week. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, that the nominee applied for the BMC. There were many vacancies in 2013. She had 21 years experience, district attorney, and in the court, and wasn't even interviewed. I want to thank you for all the time that you afforded me. I think it was 4 hours. We closed the diner. So I thank you for that. And, with your family's history and their dedication, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I ask every nominee this. We have 21 attorneys that have the awesome responsibility to hold you. And I'd like to know, how many were there at your hearing?
They were running two different interview sessions at that point, so I think there were 4 on Zoom and 4 or 5 in the hearing room at the.
Can you imagine? So the majority of them never met you, never saw you, never talked to you, never called you, and they voted for your nomination. I'm not pointing to you because you deserve it. You deserve it. So I want to say that. But I just have to say, I can't even name all the people, and I would be remiss if I did mention Judge Machera. He said he learned so much from you, and he's so grateful, and he's so happy that you're going to be a judge. Thank you.
Councilor Ionello.
Thank you. I forgot to mention my good friend, we used to work together many, many years ago, Judge Michael Boyne. We worked at the courthouse, so I don't know, in a few years, but a couple. Strong supporter of yours, he called me, and I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you, Judge Boyne.
I forgot to mention one thing, Judge Rafi Hussein called me, and he's a huge fan, so I just told him I would mention that, and he's a big fan. Thank you.
So, just on the issue of the JNC, you know, there's 21 members of that body, and they meet every Tuesday evening, sometimes till late in the evening. They're from all over the state. And then they spend a pretty good amount of time, probably about 20 hours a month, on checking out people and making phone calls, doing the due diligence. Do all that for nothing. Get a dime for it. It's a good public service to do. With that, I agree. Yes, Councilor Duff.
Chairman, I wasn't going to say it, but since you brought it up, I am going to say, and to add on to your point, you know, I don't agree with this governor about a whole lot of things. I do agree with him on some things. And I've said before, you know, I actually have a master's degree in organizational development and how we make organizations work more efficiently and better. This governor has chosen to do exactly what you started referring to, is they split the JNC in half to keep the judicial process moving. Half meet with one candidate and half meet with the other candidate. Now, that may not be how it was done 25 years ago, but things have changed. People have changed, modes of efficiency have changed, and the governor has changed. Now, the next governor, whoever it may be, may decide to do something different. I think it's a good process because of what Councilor Jubenville said. These people are volunteers. Some of them live in Pittsfield. To expect them to drive to Boston on their own dime every single week to provide a public service is a little bit much. And so I think the public, because we hear this thing every week going, oh, no one shows up for the meeting. That's not true. That's just not true. They may not be there physically, but they get back together and they discuss every single candidate. So to imply that this group of 20+ volunteers is negligent in their job is wrong. When I grew up, something like that was called a lie. So it's not true, and I think it's important that what you said, it goes to the record if people are watching and it is recorded, that they understand JNC is doing their job, albeit differently than how they did it 25 years ago. So,
Chair.
Yes.
On the issue, every single one of those JNC representatives read every one of those 40-page applications, not just for the ones that make it through to us after meeting with the governor, et cetera. They have a tremendous amount of work to do in order to end the backlogs. The governor started to implement this new system. Every single person, whether they're at the interview in person or not, has read that interview. They have discussed who gets through for an interview with the JNC. They then do due diligence. Individual people do the due diligence. Every single one of them is aware of every candidate's qualifications, what the report comes back on as far as due diligence is concerned. And I think they do one heck of a job. Thank you.
So,
We've all had our say. With that, the meeting is closed.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
You consider it, Counselor.
Good job.
2022. I am pleased to nominate Eric T. Donovan to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Brockton District Court. I'm enclosing his resume for your convenience. So the way we're going to work is we're going to hear from your two witnesses, Mr. Donovan, Clerk Donovan, and then we're going to hear from you, and then the council will be able to ask you questions. Judge Vitale, please.
Morning, and thank you for inviting me here to Clerk Donovan. Nice to see you, counselors. I have the fortune of knowing Eric Donovan in my capacity as an attorney, in my capacity as a judge. I'm now the first justice in Brockton District Court. I met Clerk Donovan when he was an ACM in Brockton. He was there for 8 years. As an attorney, he was always very helpful to the bar advocate program that I supervised and to the litigants that came in the courthouse. I think we're fortunate to have somebody with his level of experience in a clerk's office to come help us in the Brockton District Court. I will say this, that we've been under the capable hands of acting clerk prime for the last 2 years, or almost 2 years, since Mr. Creedon retired. And I can't think of anybody more fitting to fill the shoes of Mr. Creedon and clerk prime than Eric Donovan. He is a smart, capable attorney. He is an excellent clerk. He is somebody who is familiar with the population of Brockton and the cultural sensitivities that we have in the community of Brockton. I think he'd be an excellent leader for that clerk's office. And I thank the council for inviting me to say something on his behalf. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think the council and the Commonwealth would be in good hands with Clerk Donovan as the clerk in Brockton District Court.
Thank you very much for coming, Judge. Any questions? Kennedy?
Testimony.
Thank you.
Comment.
Councilor Hurley.
Thank you for your service. I hope you wear a helmet and a flak vest every day.
So it's a busy place, and I think that somebody with Clerk Donovan's experience is a perfect fit
Yeah,
for that community.
I worked in most of the time in Chicopee, but I did work in Springfield. And
Very similar. I started as a public defender in Springfield, and I worked as a public defender in Brockton. They're very similar communities.
sure. So
Thank you,
thank you for your
Judge.
service.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Michael Branch, Chief Probation Officer. Welcome.
Welcome and good morning, and thank you for having me here today to speak on behalf of Mr. Donovan. I've known Mr. Donovan for 15 years. I've known Mr. Donovan prior to being placed at Brockton District Court as a Chief Probation Officer. I met him in my capacity as an Assistant Chief when I was working at Dorchester District Court. Mr. Donovan has always been a caring person, speaks to people with respect and dignity. And when you're in a leadership and managerial position, managing different personalities, you have to have that. You have to deal with people and treat people with respect and dignity, and also manage people, manage all the different personalities that you come across. Brockton is a very diverse court. And when Eric was there as an ACM prior, always handled his courtroom, always handled people with respect, always kept the courtroom flowing, kept the cases flowing at that time. And you guys know, ladies know, in a very busy court, metrics and getting case flow management is very, very big in how we maintain our day and maintain the dignity of the court and case flow management of the cases. I think he'll be an outstanding leader. I look forward to working with him. Continue to work with Judge Vitale. I think we've been missing a leader in that department. Ms. Prime has done an outstanding job as an acting, but you can only do so much as an acting. You can't put your foot on what you want to do within that department. He's full of outstanding ideas and energy. You have to have energy when you work in big courts like this because it's a very fast-paced situation that we're dealing with. I look forward to working with Mr. Donovan and continue to work and serve the community in the various towns that within our jurisdiction.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. You. All right. Anyone in opposition of the nominee? Terry, you want to check the door?
Well, there's a line outside and security.
All right. I'm all set. It's your turn.
Thank you, Council, and I'd like to thank the entire council for taking up my nomination here today. I'd like to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Alito for nominating me. I'd like to thank Bob Ross, Legal Counsel, and Lauren Green, Executive Director of the JNC, for shepherding me through this process. The Judicial Nominating Commission as well as Joint Bar Commission for the hard work that they have done, not just with myself, but with all the nominees. And I'd like to thank this body confirming my nomination to the Brighton Division of the Boston Municipal Court almost 5 years ago. And I'm hopeful that they'll be so kind to me, or you'll be so kind to me again. I'd like to thank my witnesses here today, Chief Branch, the Regional Administrative Justice, as well as our first Justice, Brockton, Michael Vitale, my beautiful wife, Veronica. We were fortunate enough to celebrate our 23rd anniversary this past Sunday. I'd like to thank my mother and father who are
24.
watching. Who are watching on Zoom, who couldn't be here today. My siblings, all my in-laws, and in particular, my late in-law, my brother-in-law Johnny, who passed away on this day 7 years ago, about him all the time, for all the support they provided me, as well as my nephews and nieces, and lastly, and most importantly, the three beautiful children that Veronica has given me, my son Brendan, my son Timothy, and my daughter Karen. They couldn't be here today. They're working and as well as in school. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I want this body to know that if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I'll work hard each and every day to serve the people of Brockton as well as the surrounding communities and everyone throughout the Commonwealth. I learned hard work from my and a work ethic from my father, and I learned empathy and compassion from my mother. So again, I'd like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much. When both your witnesses said, referred to you as an ACM, my hearing's like a little off. I thought they said ATM, and that's probably what your children call you, the ATM, I'm guessing.
But at least one of them does.
Councilor Jubinville.
I've known you a long time, interacted with you in the system for years. Did a great job in Brighton. I think you do a great job. Put a vote for you.
Thank you, Councilor Jubinville. Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for all the time you afforded me. I would never understand this process, and I've talked about it so many times, and I wish they would change it. For you to come to have this hearing, there was no need. You have done your job, and you have been, everyone knows. And so you're transferring to another court. Yeah. We had, now he's retired, Judge Brennan, who went from the district court to the superior court, and then he decided there was too much writing, so he asked to go back to the district court, but he didn't need to have a hearing. The rules are crazy. And so we have in our file that he retired from the superior court, but not true, it was the district court. But that can be done within the court. And I think it should be done in the court to transfer a person. We transferred a judge, Councilor Rinaldo and I were the only ones on at the time, who moved to the Cape. So he found an opening down the Cape and was transferred. He had to have another hearing. It doesn't make sense. So I want to apologize for that because you are so qualified. Tell me, tell us, I know, we've been there for a long time and I appreciate finding out all about and happy anniversary. Tell me, how you managed to get through the pandemic and what you did for the people that were working for you. How did you get through?
Thank you for that question, Council. What we did, we utilized a lot of the technology that's been provided to the court. We increased our use of Zoom. We also the trial court gave us some tools where we were able to create teams so that we could one group that would come in, being served, and the court remained open, and the clerk's office remained open, and then another team would come in. So that way, in case there was ever an outbreak, it wouldn't affect the operation of the court. We could still continue, and I'm happy and pleased to say that although several courts throughout the Commonwealth unfortunately had to shut down for brief periods of time because of the pandemic, the Brighton Division never closed down.
Tell me, is there one case that came before you that stands out in your memory that you'll always remember? Maybe it was you were pleased about the outcome, or maybe you weren't.
There's I've handled a lot of cases in terms of, and many of them stick out to me for different reasons. But if I had to pick one, it's probably while I was an assistant clerk in Brockton, in a clerk's hearing.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, go ahead. I want to hear you.
It involved a motor vehicle homicide, and it was a tragic accident, and the person that was accused of having committed the offense was very remorseful, very upset, and it was really a tragic accident. Did not issue. By the Commonwealth, was brought up and it was heard. I believe it was Judge Dolly at the time who heard the appeal, and my decision was held.
Now, I mean, your responsibilities won't be any different going to another courthouse, will it be?
No,
What will be the difference for you?
the size of the court, the number of staff, and just managing those individuals.
So you'll have more?
That'll be a logical, yes.
Responsibilities.
It's similar responsibilities, but yes, I mean, there's more people, so with more people, in a larger case volume, yes.
Right, right. So there's that opening, you'll probably be there right away.
I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed and sworn in. They're working right away.
Well, again, I hope that they change this because you are qualified, and to come before us to transfer laterally from one court to another doesn't make sense. So I hope that someone out there will listen and change it. And I thank you for coming and bringing your life. I feel I know so much about you. You afforded me so much time. It was really a pleasure meeting you. I feel like I know your children, and you're so proud of them, and I'm sure they're just as proud of you. So really, we spent so much time together. We found you qualified 5 years ago. I haven't changed my mind. You never let me down. And I've always said I don't have any way to know how someone I vote on is going to be. I don't have a crystal ball, but I didn't need one with you. You've done an excellent job, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you, Counselor.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ianello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my good friend from Waltham. There's no reason why we should have had a hearing. Having said that, I was a little surprised my good friend even asked you one question, to be honest with you, and I'm a little surprised she even had to meet with you for all that long, because there is no need for a hearing. Excuse me. Excuse me. So there is no need. We know you called me on the phone, we spoke. We spoke obviously a lot more when you first went before us, but total, and there's no reason to ask any questions. We all know you're doing a great job. Looking forward to voting.
Thank you. Counselor Duff.
I have no questions. I had a great conversation with you, and I'm quite satisfied.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Counselor Kennedy.
Given that I know you very well, you're doing a great job in Brighton, you're gonna be missed there. Given that it is a transfer, I'm gonna suggest to Councilor Ferrara make a motion that we vote on you today as opposed to waiting. There's no reason for us to wait on your vote.
I agree. After hearing from Councilor Devaney, that it should be that way, I will make that motion that we vote on the nominee today.
Can I say?
I will support that motion based upon what Councilor debate.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
Let's make a-
Yes, go ahead.
Can we have a letter from this council to say that when someone's making a lateral move, it's not necessary to bring that person in? If we could do that, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Mr. Chair.
We can discuss that.
Okay.
But for today, I think you have the right idea. I think we should vote on him today. Okay, so I make the motion, you second it? No.
Let's do it at the end.
At the end? Okay. All right, thank you.
Respect for the Yom Kippur holiday next week.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. Councilor DePaulo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thank you for your service to the Commonwealth. Most of your career has been in that light, and you're obviously good at maintaining relationships, which is important because this council is certainly very supportive. I was not on the council, and the council changes, so I think it's good that lateral appointments would come before us, just because there could be new faces on the council, right? So that's my only. I've heard the JNC praised this morning, and I think I actually do agree with Councilor Duff that the process they've chosen to try to be more efficient. I'm totally okay with that. But we do need to pump the brakes a little bit because no one's perfect. Because, what's that?
What about me?
Except for my colleagues.
Sister Mary Hurley.
Nobody's perfect, right? So I recently had a nominee who even the first two law partners on their application weren't called during diligence process. So some slips through the cracks, I think. I've seen excuses made to kick minority candidates out of diligence when the same disqualifications were present in other nominees who were perhaps better connected or whatever the case might be. So I just want to pump the brakes. No one's perfect. I am proud of how the JNC works in general with that. So I just have some brief questions so I can make sure I feel good about you. So I always look in the application of how a nominee would characterize how their discretion ought to be exercised. So could you tell me about your perspective on that regarding sentencing?
Sentencing?
I apologize. Could you characterize your own views on how your judicial discretion or how one's judicial discretion should be exercised?
Sure. So let me take first, which,
Right.
most likely would be most pertinent to me. So I believe that in the clerk's hearings, the standard that we use, as you know, is probable cause. Would a reasonable person believe that this offense occurred? But just because probable cause may be established does not necessarily mean that a complaint should issue. Many times, in my opinion, it shouldn't issue.
Why is the charge being considered in the first place?
Well,
Do you think that prosecutors overcharge?
there've been occasions, sure, of course, there may be occasions where prosecutors overcharge.
Sure.
But it may simply be that the incident did actually occur, but what's the right remedy? Is the remedy giving somebody a criminal record that otherwise shouldn't have a criminal record? And so I think that there's a lot of tools that are available in our disposal, such as keeping cases open and diverting them for a period of time to make sure there's no further difficulties with the individual, and basically keep it open at an administrative level so that the rest of their life isn't negatively impacted.
A lot of people support you. I've talked to, so I don't have any other questions for you this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Sister Mary Hurley.
Thank you, Father. We met in person, talked to you on the phone, looked at your application, and I just want to ask one question. How many years have you been married?
23.
23.
Yeah.
Huh?
Dated for 7 before that.
What's it go? Wow. I asked somebody that once, how long have you been married? They said happily, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. So I agree with everything that has been said here today. I would point out, just for the record, that the reason that you have to apply as opposed to a judicial transfer, which the Supreme Court has given authority to the various first justices or chief justices of the various divisions of the trial court, is the statutory scheme. And I agree that maybe that should be changed. For right now, that's why it happens. Being the most familiar with that stuff. When I sat in various courts in other parts of the state, if it was, for example, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, when a district court judge goes there, there's only a probate court judge 2 days a week, a superior court judge 2 days a week. And the other days that they're not there, I would become a probate court judge as well as the district court judge and a superior court judge, all by designation from the various chief justices of those courts. Sometimes I don't think there's other courts where you don't have a probate court judge there the same day, and there's other instances where I was actually designated as a housing court judge. So statutory theme or scheme is if it's a permanent transfer, then you gotta come back. So that's enough education for one day.
Thank you, Counselor.
I'm totally satisfied, gonna vote for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now it's me. I don't have any questions. We've talked in length. You've done a great job, as everyone has already said, and you're gonna do a great job in Brockton. I appreciate your public service. And with that, we conclude the hearing. Thank you.
To order. And I'm going to ask Councilor Hurley for our prayer and pledge today.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Obviously, with what's going on in the state of Florida and the whole Gulf Coast, I'd like to offer a prayer that no lives are lost and that the destruction is kept to a minimum. That may be a little bit unrealistic, but you don't ask, you can't get. So with the help of God, we all ask for the Hurricane Ian to subside and for the people of Florida and all of the Gulf Coast to be safe, as well as to help all of the people in Cuba and the other islands to recover as quickly as possible. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I recognize Councilor Jubenville for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I recognize Councilor Devani for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public and justices of the peace.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I recognize Councilor Devani again for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Elizabeth R. Certa to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Waltham District Court.
I couldn't be more proud. I don't know anyone that has come before me recently that is more qualified to be a clerk magistrate. This is someone who is an immigrant who came to this country when she was 22 from Spain. And she has, by herself, she has become one of the most respected people in the court by all of our district judges and beyond. She is an interpreter, and she is chief of the interpreters, and she has been in every court and overseas. There's too much to tell, but I will try to cut it down to say, Judge Budd, may the staff liaison for the Executive Office of the Trial Court to the SJC. She's the Trial Court Language Access Coordinator. She has been in the trial court, and something that I am very pleased to see that she has established. I served on a commission of disabilities for 22 years, and this nominee has been appointed and established the ADA task force that exists for access accommodations, for grievances, and for making recommendations on improvement. Chief Justice Dawley had her established, and she organized a series of bench bar meetings across the state to improve the district court practices with judges, with clerk magistrates, with chief probation officers, local practitioners, and court personnel. She has won the respect of everyone through the court. She has been appointed to so many committees, and she has established so many programs that makes our court system more public and more accessible. And Justice Carey appointed her as to lead and coordinate the implementation of the trial court language access plan. And to have someone like Attorney Certa to go to Waltham, I know firsthand, I represent Waltham, there is a large community of Hispanics. What this means to have a clerk magistrate that speaks Spanish fluently, it puts that person at ease. I can't even imagine going into a court where everyone spoke Spanish. So, she's knocked it out of the park, really. And I thank the governor and you for appointing her. It's long overdue. She has the age, she has a life experience, And she's bringing all that, and most of all, her compassion and her empathy. And everyone that has ever worked with her has said the same thing about her compassion. So I could go on, but I don't want to bore everybody. But I am proud to put her name in nomination and to make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. I recognize Councilor Jubenville for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Alex J. Valderrama to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Eastern Division of the Housing Court.
So moved.
Second.
I won't take up
There's a motion and a second, Councilor.
I won't take up the time, but I met with him, and not only, you can't separate the personal from the public, and he's just a very caring, experienced, qualified person. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Councilor Pereira?
Yes.
Councilor Jubenville?
Yes.
Councilor Cavini?
Yes.
Councilor Miller?
Yes.
Councilor Duff?
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. I recognize Councilor Hurley for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Diana S. Velez Harris to the position of Associate Justice of the Probate and Family Court.
I am thrilled with this nomination, and again, she's an Hispanic person who has really done fabulously well in the probate court, and it will bring a new dimension to her work there. So I make this motion proudly. Thank you.
There's a motion and a second. Councilor?
Okay, I get a 3 vote. This is an excellent candidate, and, she's just so compassionate. She has such empathy and qualified, has the age, has what we look for, and this is what we should be looking for, not a 40-year-old, not a 37-year-old. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We may begin the roll call.
Councilor Jubenville?
Yes.
Councilor Cavini?
Councilor Devaney?
Yes.
Councilor Miller?
Yes.
Councilor Duff?
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Councilor Hurley?
Yes.
Councilor Pereira?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we entertain a vote on the two nominees we had today, so we don't have to have a assembly next week with Yom Kippur, out of respect for Yom Kippur. In addition to that, I think that, especially given the clerk magistrate simply being moved from one court to another, it just makes sense, as Councilor Devaney pointed out, probably wasn't even necessary to have a hearing. So I'm going to move that we vote on those two nominees today.
Second.
And so a motion and a second.
Point of information about the other appointment. Can you tell me what is the reason that we would vote today?
We can't have a hearing on Yom Kippur.
Excuse me. Could you please tell us? Thank you.
Because at the request of this council, the Yom Kippur holiday next week will not bring us into assembly or to the State House for your hearings.
So there's a motion and a second. I move the vote.
So,
There's
Move the vote.
excuse me, just for the public to know, through you, Councilor Kennedy, would you tell the public why? Okay.
But for Yom Kippur, so we don't have an assembly next week. That's why I'm suggesting it.
Okay.
Vote.
There's a motion and a second. Does it require a roll call? No.
Yes.
Okay,
So we
Commence the roll call.
vote to change the date.
we're going to vote to advance the nominations, or vote for appointment today.
I didn't know we need a vote.
So we have a motion and a second.
Question is whether we vote on the two nominations today.
Yes.
No.
So we're not going to we do not, all in favor of moving for these votes, say aye. Okay. Anyone negative? No. Okay, there is a no vote on the motion to move for these two motions that I will now make. Okay. I recognize Councilor Jubenville for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Margaret Albertson to the position of Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court.
Outstanding candidate. I move I move for that.
Second.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Councilor?
Just excellent. And the thing is that, when you look at 30 years that she has worked in the courthouse, so respected. So many judges have called me, even our Marty Walsh had called. And the thing is that it's concerning to me that she was 21 years in 2013, that she had the experience in the district attorney's office, in the court system as a clerk magistrate, and yet she didn't even get an interview. There's something wrong. There were so many vacancies that year in the BMC, and she didn't get an interview. So it took 30 years for her to reach this point, and I couldn't be more happy. She has the age, qualifications, everything, and I'm just proud to third it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Member Devaney?
Yes.
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 All right, thank you. I recognize Councilor Ferreira for motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Eric T. Donovan to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Brockton District Court.
Thank you, Governor. I am very pleased to make that motion. He's done a superb job for almost 5 years in the Brighton District Court, and he's going to make a great clerk in Brockton as well. Thank you.
Second.
A motion and a second.
Just again, to be redundant, I hope that there will be a change in this. When we see someone that's qualified, that's had a wonderful, outstanding background, if anyone wants to investigate, that should be enough, that they just be transferred to one court to another, doesn't deserve it. So, I've said it.
Don't have hearings on people who used to transfer.
That's it. That is obviously your prerogative.
And just one last question. With all due respect, there's no requirement that we have a hearing on any nominee or any
I
position.
know that the Constitution does, you're not,
We don't have to have a
the
hearing.
Constitution does not say it, but 63, 64 years ago, we decided, this council, not me, but this council decided, and rightfully so, should have a hearing.
Okay, we have a motion.
Last but not least,
A second.
the requirement to have somebody appointed from one court position to another court position on a permanent basis to make one of those vacancies available for a new nominee requires it go through the
Yes.
full process.
Yes.
The trial courts have in their power the right to make temporary transfers. Those transfers can be for a day, a year, or 10 years. And that's the way it's set up. It would take a statutory change.
Saying is we don't have to have a hearing.
The issue relative to hearings is the prerogative of the councilors. So we now have a motion and a second. And we may begin the roll call.
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you very much for your time today. That concludes our assembly.